Over 90% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you love these stories, please subscribe. Your support is the inspiration that keeps this channel alive. The 14-foot bronze woman had been pointing at my bedroom window for less than 10 minutes when the real woman arrived and accused me of making her hips historically inaccurate. I stood beside the crane operator while the statue towered over my front garden, one hand planted on its waist, and the other stretched dramatically toward my house. Its bronze hair had been sculpted into a windproof helmet. Its mouth was frozen halfway through a complaint, and its expression suggested someone had just painted a mailbox the wrong shade of black. HOA. President Cynthia Barlow marched across my lawn without using the walkway. "That does not look like me," she said. I studied the statue. "You're right." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "The statue looks taller." The crane operator made a choking sound and turned away. "My name is Grant Hollis, and I lived in Cottonwood Crescent, a quiet neighborhood outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, where adobe-style houses sat beneath enormous skies, and every yard contained at least one object somebody claimed was spiritually significant. Mine had contained a small limestone burro named Raymond. Raymond was not elegant. He stood 28 inches tall, had one chipped ear, and wore an expression of permanent disappointment. My younger sister made him during her first year in art school, when she was experimenting with desert folk sculpture and refusing to explain why every animal needed eyebrows. She gave Raymond to me after I bought the house. "He looks like you before coffee," she said. "He looks unemployed." That also matches. My sister, Leah, became a successful public art sculptor years later, but Raymond remained her first completed piece. He sat beneath a desert willow near my front courtyard, surrounded by lavender, red yucca, and 3 decorative stones I had never selected, but somehow inherited with the property. Children liked him. Delivery drivers used him as a landmark. One neighbor occasionally placed a tiny straw hat on his head during summer. Nobody complained until Cynthia became HOA president. Cynthia believed Cottonwood Crescent had lost what she called visual discipline. She said this during her first neighborhood meeting while standing beneath a banner decorated with 3 different fonts. Her campaign promised cleaner lines, stronger standards, and fewer personal interpretations of Southwestern character. Raymond was apparently a personal interpretation. The first notice appeared inside my mailbox on a Monday morning. Unapproved. Figurative object. Visible from Common Street. I carried it directly to the HOA office, which occupied a converted garage beside the clubhouse. Cynthia sat behind a desk, surrounded by paint samples, fence diagrams, and photographs of other people's yards. I placed the notice in front of her. "What is an unapproved figurative object?" She looked over her glasses. "The animal statue." "Raymond?" "The burro." "He has a name?" "That does not improve compliance." I sat in the chair across from her. "He has been in my garden for 9 years." "The decorative standards were updated." "When?" "Last month." "Did the burro receive notice?" Cynthia did not smile. She explained that front yard statues were now limited to 18 inches in height unless they qualified as architectural focal features. Small birds, abstract stones, and approved religious objects were permitted. Larger animals, human figures, humorous sculptures, and what the new rule described as narrative lawn elements required removal. I read that phrase aloud. Narrative lawn elements. Yes, What story is Raymond telling? That is exactly the concern. I looked at her. You are worried my burro has a plot. The board wants yards to remain visually calm. He is made of limestone. He attracts attention. He has one eyebrow. Both eyebrows are visible. I folded the notice. Can I apply for focal feature approval? The committee would need to determine artistic merit. My sister is a professional sculptor. That does not automatically qualify the piece. Who sits on the Artistic Merit Committee? I chair it. Of course she did. Cynthia gave me 14 days to remove Raymond from public view. I could relocate him to the backyard, place him behind a 6-foot wall, or donate him somewhere more appropriate. I asked whether the city museum had requested emotionally exhausted burros. She told me sarcasm would not affect the deadline. I brought Raymond into the garage that afternoon. The garden looked wrong without him. Not empty exactly. More obedient. The neighbors noticed immediately. Mrs. Delgado from across the street knocked on my door holding the tiny straw hat she usually placed on Raymond each July. Where is he? Under administrative protection. Did someone steal him? Cynthia removed his artistic merit. Mrs. Delgado stared toward the HOA office. She has no artistic merit. That may be outside the current appeal. Within 2 days, other residents began asking questions. A family on Juniper Lane had received a warning about 2 ceramic coyotes. A retired teacher was told to remove a carved wooden owl because it exceeded the new height limit by 3 inches. Someone near the entrance had to relocate a metal roadrunner made from old farm tools because Cynthia considered visible welding marks industrial. The new rule was not really about Raymond. Cynthia wanted every front yard stripped down to approved plants, approved gravel, and decorative objects too small to develop personalities. I submitted an appeal. The Architectural Committee scheduled a 10-minute review inside the clubhouse. Cynthia sat at the center of the table beside 2 board members who looked as though they had learned about the meeting 5 minutes earlier. I brought photographs of Raymond, Leah's portfolio, the original installation date, and statements from 3 neighbors confirming the statue had never attacked property values. Cynthia examined the images. The issue is not craftsmanship. That sounds promising. It is scale and character. He is 28 inches tall, 10 inches above the standard. He has been there 9 years. Existing duration does not guarantee future compatibility. Board member Neil Harper raised one hand. Was there a complaint? Cynthia answered before I could. The committee identified the concern. Neil looked toward the other board member. Did we? The other man, Russell Kim, studied his folder. I received this packet yesterday. Cynthia tightened her jaw. The revised landscape policy was approved unanimously. Neil opened the policy. I thought we were voting on abandoned holiday decorations. You approved the full amendment. I did not realize we were regulating stone animals. That is why residents should read packets carefully. I almost felt sorry for Neil. Almost. Cynthia turned back toward me and offered a compromise. Raymond could return if I reduced him to 18 inches, removed the painted eyebrows, and changed the finish to a muted, neutral tone. He is limestone. The eyebrows create contrast. My sister carved them. They appear confrontational. They are eyebrows. They point downward. That is how disappointment works. The appeal was denied. I had 7 days to remove Raymond permanently or face daily fines. That evening, I called Leah. She answered from a fabrication studio in Albuquerque, where she was supervising a public sculpture made from recycled steel, and what sounded like several people dropping pipes. "What did you break?" she asked. "Nothing." "What did you accidentally promise?" "Also nothing." "Then why are you calling after 8? I told her about the statue rule. She became quiet, not angry at first, just quiet. Raymond had been a joke between us, but he also belonged to a difficult period in her life. She had made him after dropping out of a university program that treated folk art like an embarrassing relative. The sculpture represented the first time she finished something without asking whether her professors would approve. "They want you to cut him down?" she asked. "Or hide him?" "Do not touch him." "I wasn't planning to." "Bring him to my studio. I can keep him in the backyard." "No." Her voice changed. "Bring me Raymond." I drove him to Albuquerque the next morning. Leah's studio occupied an old industrial building filled with clay forms, welding curtains, bronze molds, scaffolding, and sculptures in various stages of becoming difficult to explain. A 12-foot metal jackrabbit stood near the entrance wearing protective goggles. Leah examined Raymond's chipped ear. She called him visually disruptive, also narratively active. That is a compliment. She did not intend it that way. Leah walked around the statue twice. Then she asked to see Cynthia's photograph. I had one from the HOA website. Cynthia stood in front of the clubhouse with one arm extended toward a newly landscaped flower bed. Her mouth was open mid-sentence, her chin was raised, and her finger pointed with enough confidence to redirect traffic. Leah stared at the image. What exactly does the new rule allow? Anything under 18 inches. And larger architectural focal features. After committee approval. Who controls the committee? Cynthia? Leah smiled. It was not a friendly smile. What about temporary art installations? I didn't ask. What about structural ornaments? I didn't ask that either. What about human figures? Specifically discouraged. She looked back at the photograph. Discouraged is not prohibited. I knew that expression. It was the same expression she wore before building a steel rooster large enough to cast a shadow over a city councilman. What are you thinking? Raymond needs representation. Legal representation? Bronze. I laughed. She did not. Leah explained that a foundry she worked with had an unused casting slot after a municipal project was delayed. She also had access to a large clay armature, originally intended for a 12-foot historical figure. With modifications, the frame could become a 14-foot sculpture. Of Cynthia. Pointing at my house. I stared at her. That is completely unreasonable. Yes, it will cost a fortune. Not if we classify it as a collaborative demonstration piece. Demonstrating what? The emotional scale of neighborhood criticism. That is not a real category. It is in public art. I walked around Raymond. What happens to him? He becomes part of the base. I stopped. Leah described the design. The bronze figure would stand on a low pedestal shaped like an oversized architectural review form. Cynthia's pointing hand would extend toward my house. At her feet, Raymond would remain exactly as he was, looking upward with his original disappointed eyebrows. The title would be, She Found Something. I laughed so suddenly that a welder across the studio looked over. Leah continued. We do not copy her face exactly. Good. We create an exaggerated generic authority figure. also good. With her hairstyle, riskier. Her glasses. Leah. Her posture. She will know. Everyone will know. The sculpture would be absurd, but technically original. It would not include Cynthia's name, HOA logo, or exact likeness. The face would be broad and stylized, the expression theatrical, and the clothing simplified into what Leah called timeless administrative drapery. I called it a pantsuit. Leah insisted bronze had dignity. We reviewed the HOA rules together. The new statue policy was badly written. It limited decorative garden figures, but separately allowed large architectural focal features if they were structurally engineered, professionally installed, and integrated into the property's approved landscape design. Approval still appeared necessary. Then we found the sentence Cynthia had added to speed up standardized improvements. Focal features matching an existing approved exterior material and not obstructing sightlines may proceed under owner certification pending later review. My courtyard already contained bronze light fixtures. The statue would match an existing exterior material. It would stand behind the required street visibility triangle. And owner certification allowed installation before later review. Cynthia had created the rule to let residents install expensive prefabricated features without waiting for monthly meetings. She had not imagined a 14-foot version of herself. I filled out the owner certification form. Under description of feature, I wrote, "Bronze directional figure with integrated heritage animal element." Under purpose, I wrote, "Clarifies visual attention toward primary residents." Under style, I wrote, "Contemporary Southwestern administrative realism." Leah read the form. "You made that up." So did they. We submitted it electronically. The system automatically confirmed receipt and stated that installation could proceed unless the HOA issued a written safety objection within 5 business days. Cynthia did not read it carefully. She sent a one-line response. "Owner certification acknowledged. Final review will occur after installation." Leah printed the email and framed it. The foundry worked faster than I believed possible. A digital artist converted the stylized design into full-size foam sections. Leah reshaped the expression by hand, making the statue look outraged but strangely heroic. The pointing finger required internal reinforcement because, according to the structural engineer, extended accusations produce significant wind load. Raymond was not cast. The original limestone burro would remain at the base, protected beneath the bronze figure's enormous shadow. During fabrication, a mystery developed. Someone began sending Leah anonymous suggestions. The first email recommended making the statue's shoes smaller. The second asked whether the figure could hold a clipboard. The third contained a photograph of Cynthia's favorite sunglasses with no message. Leah assumed I was sending them. I assumed she was entertaining herself. Neither of us was responsible. The sender knew details about the project that only a handful of people knew. They knew the figure would point. They knew Raymond would stand at the base. They even knew the pedestal dimensions. One message contained only 4 words. "Make the finger longer." Leah printed it and taped it above the workbench. "Artistically sound advice," she said. "Someone is leaking the design. Or the statue has developed subscribers." The final anonymous message arrived 2 days before installation. It included a street map of Cottonwood Crescent, with a red line extending from the statue's pointing finger past my roof and toward the HOA clubhouse. At the end of the line, someone had circled a narrow section of wall. Aim 3 degrees left. Leah and I studied the map. The statue had been designed to point at my second-floor window. 3 degrees left would shift the line beyond my house and toward the clubhouse. Why? I asked. Leah looked at the map again. I don't know. We ignored the suggestion. At least, I thought we did. Installation morning began with a flatbed truck, a mobile crane, 4 foundry workers, 2 structural engineers, and Mrs. Delgado standing across the street in a sun visor with a folding chair. The bronze figure arrived in sections. Boots first, then the lower body, then the torso with one arm attached. Neighbors emerged slowly as the sculpture rose above the courtyard wall. Phones appeared. Cars stopped. A man delivering groceries reversed 20 feet so he could see the face again. By the time the head was lowered into place, more than 30 residents stood along the street. The statue was magnificent, terrible, enormous. Its bronze jacket folded dramatically over one hip. Its sculpted hair curved around its head like a protective helmet. Its left hand rested on its waist while the right arm stretched toward my house with an accusing finger nearly 6 feet long. Raymond stood at the base, looking exhausted by the entire situation. Mrs. Delgado crossed herself. Neil Harper whispered, "Oh no." Russell Kim whispered, "Oh yes." The crane operator secured the final bolt. Leah stepped back. I looked up at the bronze face. It really doesn't look exactly like her. No, the chin is stronger. Heroic exaggeration. The hair is close. Administrative geometry. Then Cynthia arrived. She stopped her SUV in the middle of the street. For 10 full seconds, she remained behind the wheel. The bronze figure pointed toward my house above her. Raymond judged her from below. Cynthia finally stepped out. She walked across my lawn, ignored the path, and stopped beneath the statue's extended hand. "What is that?" Leah answered before I could. "Contemporary Southwestern administrative realism." Cynthia looked at her. "It looks like me." "No," Leah said. The neighbors became silent. Cynthia pointed toward the statue. "That hair is mine. It is bronze. The glasses are mine. They are sculpted. The posture is mine." Leah tilted her head. "Do you often stand 14 feet tall?" Cynthia turned toward me. "You did this to humiliate me." I installed an approved focal feature. It was not approved. I showed her the email on my phone. "You acknowledged owner certification." I acknowledged a bronze directional figure. That is what this is. You deliberately concealed the subject. The subject is attention. She stared at me. "That sentence means nothing." Leah smiled. "Public art." Cynthia walked around the pedestal. She read the bronze title plate. She found something. Then she saw Raymond beneath the figure. His eyebrows remained unchanged. For one brief moment, her anger became confusion. "You put the prohibited statue inside the new statue?" "He is an integrated heritage animal element." Neil Harper turned away because he was laughing too hard to remain respectful. Cynthia ordered the crane crew to stop work. The installation supervisor informed her the work was finished. She demanded the statue be removed. The structural engineer asked whether she had a written safety objection. She did not. She demanded an emergency board inspection. I agreed. The entire time, the bronze figure continued pointing over her shoulder. Cynthia finally looked upward. Then she followed the direction of the finger. It was not pointing at my bedroom window. The anonymous suggestion had been used. Leah had shifted the arm 3 degrees left without telling me. The bronze finger passed above my roofline and aimed directly at the HOA clubhouse wall across the neighborhood. More specifically, it pointed toward a narrow decorative panel beside the office entrance. Cynthia's face changed. Not anger this time, alarm. She looked at Leah. You moved it. Leah frowned. Moved what? The angle. The engineer adjusted for sightlines. Cynthia turned toward the clubhouse. Then she began walking quickly across the street. Mrs. Delgado stood from her chair. What is over there? Nobody knew. But Cynthia did. That was the mystery. The giant bronze cairn had been installed as revenge for Raymond. Somehow, it was pointing directly at something the real Karen desperately did not want anyone to notice. Cynthia reached the clubhouse before anyone else, which would have looked less suspicious if she had not begun pulling decorative trim from the wall with both hands. The narrow bronze finger still pointed across the neighborhood from my courtyard, perfectly aligned with the panel beside the office entrance. Cynthia glanced over her shoulder, saw residents following at a distance, and immediately stopped tugging. She smoothed her jacket, placed one hand against the wall, and pretended she had been inspecting the paint. Mrs. Delgado arrived carrying her folding chair. Is the wall in violation too? Cynthia stepped away from the panel. This area is restricted. Neil Harper looked around the empty walkway. Restricted by what? Board records are stored inside. We are outside. You are interfering with an active inspection. Russell Kim studied the bronze finger rising above my roof. It seems the inspection came to us. Cynthia turned toward Leah. You deliberately aimed that statue here. Leah folded her arms. I adjusted the arm to comply with the sightline triangle. That is not what you said earlier. I said the engineer adjusted it. You knew something was behind this wall. I have never entered your clubhouse. Cynthia's eyes moved toward me. Then Grant told you. I did not know the wall existed until 10 minutes ago. That was true. I had attended meetings inside the clubhouse, but I had never paid attention to the decorative panel beside the entrance. It looked like every other southwestern accent Cynthia had introduced since becoming president. Tan stucco, dark wood trim, hammered metal studs, and enough artificial aging to make a new building appear tired. The panel itself was narrow and unusually deep. It stood between the office door and a pair of windows, extending from waist height to the roof line. A row of metal rosettes decorated its surface. One near the bottom appeared brighter than the others, as though someone handled it regularly. Mrs. Delgado noticed. That flower has fingerprints. Cynthia moved in front of it. It is decorative hardware. Neil stepped closer. Why is it loose? It is not loose. He touched the rosette. It turned. A quiet metallic click came from inside the wall. Every person stopped moving. Cynthia's face lost color. Russell looked at Neil. Did you just unlock the building? I touched a flower. The panel shifted outward by less than an inch. There was a hidden door in the clubhouse wall. For one extraordinary moment, nobody spoke. Then Mrs. Delgado unfolded her chair, sat down, and settled her handbag in her lap. I knew today had potential. Cynthia pushed the panel closed. This is an HOA storage compartment. Neil looked at her. Why is it concealed? It matches the architecture. What is inside? Archived materials. Which materials? Landscape records. Russell's eyes moved toward the statue. Did someone know this was here? Cynthia glared at Leah. She did. I did not, Leah said. Then why did you point at it? I received an anonymous suggestion. The admission shifted everyone's attention. I explained the emails, the photograph of Cynthia's sunglasses, the request to lengthen the finger, and the map showing the 3-degree adjustment. Leah showed them the final message on her phone. Aim 3 degrees left. Neil read it twice. Who sent this? We don't know, I said. Cynthia reached for the phone. Leah pulled it back. Artist correspondence. This may involve HOA property. It involved my sculpture. It was used to target board records. It was used to improve composition. Mrs. Delgado raised one hand. The composition is excellent. Cynthia ignored her. She said the hidden compartment contained old paint samples, sign templates, and archived landscaping photographs. Nothing inside concerned residents. She ordered everyone to leave and announced that the board would review the statue during a closed emergency session. Neil did not move. Why closed? Property and legal matters. What legal matter? The harassment of an officer. Russell pointed toward the bronze figure. It does not have your name. It has my body. Leah looked at the statue. The shoulders are broader. Cynthia closed her eyes. I almost felt bad for her. Then she placed her hand over the brighter rosette, blocking anyone else from opening the panel, and my sympathy weakened. Neil asked for access. Cynthia refused. He reminded her that he was a board member. She said only the president and records custodian could enter archive storage. Russell asked who the records custodian was. Cynthia answered too slowly. I am. That made Mrs. Delgado lean forward in her chair. Convenient. A white pickup truck entered the parking area. The driver was a thin man in paint-stained work clothes, whom I recognized from several neighborhood projects. His name was Leon Mercer, and he owned a small landscaping company that Cynthia frequently used for common area improvements. He slowed when he saw the crowd. Then he noticed the open edge of the hidden panel. Leon stopped the truck so abruptly that a bucket rolled off the passenger seat. Cynthia walked toward him. Why are you here? You called me. I did not. You left a message about the courtyard planter. Not today. Leon looked toward the bronze statue visible above the houses. What is that? Mrs. Delgado answered. Accountability with hips. Cynthia turned sharply. Enough. Leon stepped out of the truck. His eyes returned to the concealed door. Why is that open? Neil studied him. You know about it? Leon wiped both hands on his pants. I installed it. The mystery became heavier. Cynthia immediately said the compartment was included during a routine office renovation. Leon nodded, but his expression suggested the explanation was incomplete. Russell asked when the work occurred. Last summer. Was the board told? I don't handle board notices. What did Cynthia ask you to build? A hidden storage cabinet. Cynthia corrected him. Integrated archive storage. Leon gave her a tired look. You called it a hidden cabinet? Mrs. Delgado crossed one leg over the other. I prefer his terminology. Cynthia told Leon to leave. He did not. Instead, he looked at Neil and Russell. "You should probably see what's inside." Cynthia's posture changed. "Leon, I'm tired of this. Your contract requires confidentiality. My contract covered construction. It covered board property. It did not cover what you stored afterward." Silence settled across the walkway. The bronze Karen continued pointing. I began to understand why someone had redirected the arm. The statue had not discovered the secret by accident. Someone who knew the clubhouse had used my revenge as an enormous directional sign. Neil touched the rosette again. Cynthia grabbed his wrist. "Do not open that." He looked down at her hand. "Release me." She did. Russell stepped beside him. "You cannot prevent 2 board members from accessing association records. These are not active records. Then there is no reason to stop us. They contain private homeowner information. Then we review them privately." No. That answer changed the atmosphere. Until then, residents had treated the statue like a magnificent joke, and the hidden door like a strange architectural detail. Cynthia's refusal made the compartment feel dangerous. Neil opened the panel. Inside was not a shallow cabinet. It was a narrow storage room extending several feet into the wall. Shelves lined both sides. The nearest shelf contained rolled landscape plans, contractor brochures, and labeled paint cans. Farther inside sat plastic bins, document boxes, and dozens of garden objects removed from homes throughout Cottonwood Crescent. Ceramic birds, metal roadrunners, wooden suns, small animal statues, painted tiles, wind sculptures. And at the center of the room, resting on a folded moving blanket, was Raymond's missing straw hat. Mrs. Delgado stood so quickly her chair collapsed behind her. "That is mine." Cynthia looked toward the hat. For once, she had no prepared answer. I stepped inside the doorway but did not touch anything. A carved owl belonging to the retired teacher sat on the second shelf. The ceramic coyotes from Juniper Lane stood beside a box marked non-compliant items. Hold. Someone's stained glass sun leaned against the back wall. These were not abandoned decorations. They were personal property. Neil picked up a clipboard hanging from a hook. A list covered several pages. Each row included a homeowner's address, the object removed, the date, and a notation labeled "Voluntary Disposal." The owners had not voluntarily disposed of them. They had been told to remove them. Most assumed the items had been thrown away or donated after the HOA's maintenance crew collected them. Instead, Cynthia stored them in a secret room. Russell read several entries. "Why did you keep these?" Cynthia's voice regained some firmness. "To document repeat violations." "With the original objects?" "Photographs were insufficient." "Did homeowners authorize storage?" "They surrendered the items." "No," Mrs. Delgado said. "You told people your crew would dispose of them." Cynthia looked at her. "The association paid removal costs." "That does not make the items yours." Leon entered behind us. He pointed toward a group of wrapped pieces near the far wall. "Those arrived later." "What are they?" I asked. He did not answer. Cynthia stepped in front of the stack. "Prototype materials." Leah looked at the shapes beneath the blankets. They were too tall to be paint samples. One blanket covered what appeared to be a bronze arm. Another concealed a human head. Leah walked closer. Cynthia blocked her. "You cannot inspect artwork owned by the association." That phrase made Leah stop. "Artwork?" Cynthia realized what she had said. Too late. Leah pulled back the nearest blanket. Beneath it stood a bronze prototype statue. Not of Cynthia. of an anonymous woman in flowing southwestern robes holding a tablet against her chest. The face was generic, the expression calm, and the base included a plaque space. Leah examined the casting. "This is unfinished." Cynthia said nothing. Leon looked at the floor. Russell turned toward her. "What is this?" Cynthia took a breath. "A proposed entrance monument." "To whom?" "To community stewardship." Neil uncovered the second piece. It was another prototype, this one nearly 6 feet tall. The figure held a clipboard and pointed toward a stylized row of houses. Although the face remained incomplete, the hairstyle looked unmistakably familiar. Mrs. Delgado stared. She was building herself. Cynthia's face hardened. It was a symbolic figure. "With your hair?" I asked. "It is a common style." "With your glasses?" Leah added. "The sculptor used reference materials." Russell looked at Leon. "Was HOA money used?" Leon rubbed his forehead. "I only built the storage room." "Who made the statues?" "A foundry in Arizona." "Who approved them?" "I don't know." Neil found a document box labeled Entry Feature Concepts. Inside were invoices, concept drawings, and correspondence. The proposed monument was titled The Guardian of Cottonwood Crescent. It showed a 12-foot bronze woman standing at the neighborhood entrance, one arm extended over residents' homes. The final face study looked exactly like Cynthia. The estimated project cost was $186,000. No board member had seen it. No resident had approved it. No vote had occurred. Cynthia moved toward the box. "These are preliminary ideas." Russell held the documents away. "Why were they hidden?" "They were under development." "Why did you rewrite the statue rules?" The question landed harder than everything else. We all looked toward Raymond's hat, the confiscated garden objects, and the bronze prototypes. The new rule had not been created only to remove personal statues. Cynthia had been clearing the neighborhood's visual space. She wanted every competing figure, animal, or narrative object gone before proposing her own enormous monument at the entrance. My 14-foot bronze Karen had arrived first. Leah slowly smiled. "You were going to install a giant version of yourself." Cynthia's voice became sharp. "It represented stewardship. You ordered a 28-inch burro removed because it attracted attention. The entrance monument would unify the community. You called human figures visually disruptive. This was architectural. You called narrative lawn elements inappropriate. This was civic. You banned personality before unveiling your own." Mrs. Delgado raised one hand. "Could we put that on the plaque?" Cynthia looked toward me. "You planned this." "No." "You knew about the monument." "I did not. You coordinated with Leon." "I met him today." "You adjusted the statue to expose this room." "Someone suggested 3 degrees left." Every face turned toward Leon. He shook his head. "Wasn't me." "Then who?" Cynthia demanded. A quiet voice came from outside the storage room. "I did." The records assistant stood in the doorway. Her name was Dana Whitcomb, a soft-spoken woman in her early 60s who had worked part-time at the HOA office for nearly 7 years. Most residents knew her as the person who found lost forms, corrected meeting dates, and apologized whenever Cynthia answered email in capital letters. Dana held a folder against her chest. Cynthia stared at her. "You sent the messages?" "Yes." "You disclosed a private board concept?" "It was never a board concept." You violated confidentiality. You concealed community property. You had no right to interfere. Dana's voice remained steady. I watched residents cry while you told them family art had been discarded. Nobody interrupted her. She looked toward the hidden shelves. You kept every piece because you wanted to study what people loved, remove it, and replace it with a monument to yourself. Cynthia stepped closer. That is false. Dana opened the folder. Inside were printed emails. One message from Cynthia instructed the foundry to incorporate recognizable leadership features. Another asked whether the monument could be positioned so visitors entering Cottonwood Crescent would pass beneath the extended hand. A third described the planned unveiling as a permanent visual legacy. Leah read the phrase aloud. Permanent visual legacy. Mrs. Delgado looked toward the giant statues in my courtyard. She got one. Several people laughed, but the humor carried anger now. Dana explained that she had tried to alert Neil and Russell 2 weeks earlier. Cynthia intercepted the meeting request and changed Dana's office schedule. Then Dana saw my owner certification form describing a bronze directional figure. I thought the timing was impossible to ignore, she said. So you changed the angle? I asked. I sent Leah the map. Leah nodded. I thought Grant was becoming clever. I thought you were becoming irresponsible. I was already irresponsible. Cynthia turned on Dana. You are terminated. Neil stepped between them. No. I manage staff. Not while 2 board members are reviewing possible misuse of association property. This is insubordination. Russell held up the monument invoice. This is $186,000. It was only an estimate. Did you authorize a deposit? Cynthia did not answer. Dana handed him another page. A $28,000 deposit had already been paid from the Neighborhood Improvement Reserve. The room became completely still. This was not the same kind of corruption mystery as my earlier stories might have used, and I did not want it to become one. The shocking truth was simpler and stranger. Cynthia had used community funds to begin creating a colossal tribute to herself while banning small objects that carried meaning for everyone else. Her revenge had already been cast in bronze before mine. Mine was simply taller. Neil closed the storage room door after documenting the contents. Nobody removed anything yet. The board needed to contact homeowners, confirm ownership, and decide how to return each item properly. Cynthia attempted to schedule an emergency meeting. Russell told her 2 board members had already called one. It would take place the following afternoon in the clubhouse courtyard, where residents could attend. The agenda would include the monument deposit, the hidden storage room, the seized property, and the owner-certified bronze figure now pointing at the office. Cynthia looked toward my house. The giant statue stood above the neighborhood, finger extended like a witness who had been waiting years to testify. You will remove that before the meeting, she said. No. It depicts me. It depicts administrative realism. It is harassment. It is structurally certified. It violates the spirit of the rules. The spirit is standing at the entrance to your secret storage room. Leah touched Raymond's chipped ear. Besides, the installation is incomplete. Cynthia's expression tightened. What does that mean? Leah looked upward toward the statue's empty left hand. We still have to attach the clipboard. I turned toward her. There is a clipboard? There is now. Cynthia walked away without another word. By evening, the entire neighborhood knew. Residents came to the clubhouse one by one to identify the objects behind the hidden panel. Some became angry. Others cried. The retired teacher found the wooden owl her husband had carved before he died. A young family recovered ceramic sun tiles painted by their children. Mrs. Delgado reclaimed Raymond's straw hat and placed it carefully beneath his limestone chin. The statue above us became less ridiculous as the sun lowered. It still looked absurd. It still looked like Cynthia. But its pointing finger no longer aimed merely at a house or a clubhouse. It aimed at the exact place where authority had been hiding everyone else's stories to make room for its own. Late that night, I stood beneath the bronze figure with Leah. Workers had attached the giant clipboard to the statue's left hand. The bronze surface was blank, awaiting whatever inscription we chose. "What should it say?" she asked. I looked toward Raymond. "Nothing yet? You have an idea?" "Not fully." She followed my gaze toward the clubhouse. The emergency meeting would happen tomorrow. Cynthia still controlled the agenda, the gavel, and enough residents who feared conflict to make the outcome uncertain. The board could order my statue modified after review. It could also minimize what she had done as an over-enthusiastic entrance project. The bronze Karen needed one final detail. Not an accusation. Not Cynthia's name. Something she could not deny because she had written it herself. Dana arrived carrying a stack of copied violation notices. Every notice used the same sentence near the bottom. Decorative features must not draw excessive attention to any individual residence or resident. Leah read it. Then she looked up at the 14-foot bronze figure. "That will fit on the clipboard." I smiled. Tomorrow, Cynthia would hold her own rule above the neighborhood, and every confiscated statue would be sitting beneath it. By noon the next day, Cynthia's own rule was hanging from the giant bronze clipboard in letters large enough to read from the clubhouse steps. Decorative features must not draw excessive attention to any individual residence or resident. Beneath that sentence, the 14-foot bronze woman stood with one hand on her hip, the other finger aimed toward the concealed storage room, and a hairstyle that had become increasingly difficult for Cynthia to describe as coincidence. Raymond remained at the base wearing his recovered straw hat and the expression of a burro who had spent 9 years waiting for the neighborhood to become this ridiculous. Leah stepped back from the finished inscription. "It has balance. It has irony. It has excellent wind resistance." Mrs. Delgado adjusted Raymond's hat. "It has better leadership posture than the original." The emergency meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock, but residents began arriving an hour early, carrying the garden objects they had recovered from the hidden room. Nobody had organized them, yet they naturally formed a strange procession across the clubhouse courtyard. Ceramic coyotes stood beside carved owls, metal roadrunners leaned against painted suns, and dozens of small sculptures sat beneath the shadow of Cynthia's enormous bronze double. The display was not elegant. That was the point. Every object looked different because every household was different. Some pieces were professionally made, while others had crooked paint, chipped edges, and welding marks Cynthia considered industrial. Together, they made Cottonwood Crescent feel like a neighborhood instead of a landscaping catalog. Neil Harper arranged folding chairs. Russell Kim placed copies of the monument invoices on a table. Dana Whitcomb sat near the office door with 3 boxes of homeowner records and a list of every item stored behind the hidden panel. She looked nervous, but several residents stopped to thank her before taking their seats. Cynthia arrived alone. She parked beside the clubhouse, stepped from her SUV, and stopped when she saw the courtyard. Her gaze moved from the reclaimed sculptures to the copied rule on the giant clipboard. Then she looked up at the statue's face, which now seemed even more familiar because someone had placed a pair of oversized bronze-colored sunglasses on it. I turned toward Leah. "You added sunglasses?" "No." Mrs. Delgado looked away. Cynthia walked beneath the pointing hand. "Remove those." Mrs. Delgado opened her handbag. "They are temporary accessories. They make it look more like me." That sounds like personal interpretation. Several residents laughed. Cynthia did not. She climbed the clubhouse steps and stood behind the temporary meeting table. There was no raised platform, no formal board arrangement, and no private room separating officials from residents. The courtyard made everyone equal except for the 14-foot bronze woman supervising from above. Cynthia struck the gavel. The statue's hollow bronze arm produced a soft echo when the sound bounced across the courtyard. Someone near the back whispered. She answered. Cynthia struck the gavel again. Raymond's straw hat slipped over one eyebrow. The meeting began with her statement. She described the hidden room as a secure archive space used to preserve evidence of repeated landscape violations. She described the removed sculptures as abandoned items surrendered during enforcement. She described the entrance monument as an unfinished concept that had not yet reached the stage of resident approval. Russell opened the invoice folder. You paid a deposit. Concept development requires preliminary funding, with HOA reserves. The Neighborhood Improvement Fund exists for long-term projects. Projects approved by the board. The president can authorize design studies. Not $28,000. Cynthia looked toward Neil. You both knew an entrance feature was being considered. Neil shook his head. We discussed replacing the wooden sign. The monument was an alternative. No one discussed a bronze person. It was symbolic. Mrs. Delgado raised her hand. Symbolic of whom? Cynthia ignored her. Russell displayed the concept drawing. The 12-foot figure stood at the entrance with Cynthia's hairstyle, glasses, posture, and recognizable face. The artist's notes referred to presidential likeness studies and legacy presence. Residents murmured. Cynthia raised her voice. The resemblance was intended to represent stable leadership. A man beside the reclaimed ceramic coyotes called out, Why did stable leadership need my dogs removed first? They are coyotes. They are ceramic. They exceeded the height limit. So did your face. The courtyard erupted. Cynthia struck the gavel until the laughter weakened. I almost admired her determination. Almost. Dana opened one of the document boxes. She had matched each hidden object to its original removal notice. Many notices stated that the HOA would dispose of the item if the owner did not remove it before the deadline. Several residents had paid collection fees after maintenance workers took the objects away. Neil read the wording aloud. Dispose of. Cynthia folded her hands. Storage is a form of controlled disposal. No, Russell said. It is storage. The items were retained as evidence. Why? To prevent repeated violations. Then why were they cataloged by color, material, and emotional appeal? That question stopped her. Dana handed him a second list. Cynthia had created evaluation columns for visibility, popularity, craftsmanship, sentimental attachment, and neighborhood recognition. Raymond's entry noted that children regularly interacted with him and that delivery drivers used him as a landmark. The carved owl was marked high emotional relevance. The Roadrunner was marked strong neighborhood identity. Mrs. Delgado's straw hat was marked seasonal attachment accessory. Leah stared at the list. You studied what people loved. Cynthia's expression hardened. I studied visual impact. So you could remove the strongest objects before installing yours. That is your interpretation. It is written in your notes. Leah pointed toward another line. Beside several items, Cynthia had written, competes with proposed entrance identity. The courtyard became silent. There was no need for a hidden bank account, forged vote, or dramatic confession. Cynthia had documented the purpose herself. She removed objects that gave individual homes personality because they competed with the monument she wanted to become the neighborhood's defining image. The shocking part was not that she admired herself. It was that she believed admiration required emptying everyone else's yards first. Cynthia looked toward the reclaimed sculptures. These objects created visual clutter. Neil shook his head. They created ownership. They created inconsistency. They created homes. A community needs a unified image. Russell pointed toward the bronze statue across the courtyard. No, you wanted a unified audience. That sentence landed cleanly. Cynthia's face tightened, but she did not respond. The meeting moved to the deposit. Russell explained that the foundry contract allowed cancellation within 30 days if the project had not entered final casting. The HOA could recover most of the deposit, minus design and material costs. The prototypes in the hidden room would remain property of the association unless the board negotiated their return. A resident raised his hand. What happens to the bronze head? Neil sighed. That is not currently the largest concern. It is a very large head. Mrs. Delgado raised her hand too. We could use it as a planter. Cynthia glared. The resident lowered his hand. Withdrawn. Neil proposed canceling the entrance monument immediately. Russell seconded. Cynthia objected and insisted the community should review the final concept first. She claimed residents might support an entrance feature once they understood its purpose. Mrs. Delgado stood. We understand the purpose. You do not speak for everyone. No. Mrs. Delgado pointed toward the reclaimed objects. But neither do you. Neil called the vote. He voted to cancel. Russell voted to cancel. Board member Pauline Webb, who had remained quiet until then, voted to cancel after asking whether the prototype could be melted down and reused for a less recognizable entrance sign. The fourth member, Henry Soto, also voted to cancel. Cynthia voted against. The project ended 4-1. There was no cheering. Residents simply exhaled. The monument had never been theirs. The next motion concerned the hidden sculptures. Russell proposed returning every identifiable object to its original owner, refunding collection fees, and allowing each resident 60 days to submit the item for review under the rules that existed when it was first installed. Objects already present before the new height restriction would be treated as established features unless they created a genuine safety hazard. Cynthia immediately objected. That will return visual chaos. Raymond stood beneath the statue, wearing a straw hat. The ceramic coyotes had been positioned beside the meeting table. The carved owl watched from a folding chair. Mrs. Delgado smiled. We have missed visual chaos, The motion passed. That was the first part of the revenge. Cynthia's attempt to erase everyone's garden stories resulted in the entire collection being displayed publicly beneath a 14-foot bronze version of her. Every item she had hidden became evidence that Cottonwood Crescent had possessed an identity before she tried to manufacture one. The second part came from the statue review. Cynthia attempted to declare my bronze figure non-compliant because it depicted a human, attracted excessive attention, and exceeded every reasonable interpretation of a residential focal feature. She quoted the same new statue rule used against Raymond. I placed the owner certification form on the table. The statue matches existing bronze exterior materials. Barely. It does not obstruct the sightline triangle. It obstructs dignity. That is not listed. It creates an unreasonable scale imbalance. The rules do not specify maximum focal feature height. They assumed common sense. So did Raymond. Several residents applauded. Cynthia pointed toward the statue's face. It is a personal attack. Leah stepped forward with the sculptor's design file. The official title remained, "She Found Something." The figure was described as a stylized administrative archetype representing excessive scrutiny. The face differed from Cynthia's measurements. The clothing contained no HOA logo, and the inscription quoted an association rule without naming any individual. Leah turned toward the board. It resembles Cynthia because Cynthia has spent months publicly demonstrating the pose. Cynthia stared at her. That is insulting. It is observational sculpture. Neil covered his mouth. Russell asked whether the statue could remain temporarily while the board rewrote the focal feature standards. I could have refused. The owner certification supported me, and the statue had already become the most famous object in the neighborhood. People drove slowly past my house. Delivery drivers used the pointing hand to identify the street. Someone had created an online map label called Big Bronze Complaint Lady. But I had never wanted a 14-foot woman in my yard forever. I wanted Raymond. I looked toward Leah. She understood before I spoke. The piece was designed as a temporary demonstration, she said. Cynthia blinked. It was? No, I said. But it is now. Leah smiled. Public art apparently allowed flexible history. I offered the board a proposal. The bronze cairn would remain for 30 days, long enough for every confiscated item to be returned and every affected homeowner to complete the review process. During that period, the statue's clipboard would display Cynthia's excessive attention rule. Afterward, Leah's studio would remove the figure and reuse the bronze in a new sculpture. Cynthia leaned forward. What sculpture? We haven't decided. Mrs. Delgado raised her hand. A 14-foot burro. The courtyard exploded. Leah looked at me. That would use the material efficiently. Cynthia closed her eyes. I nearly agreed just to see what happened. Instead, I proposed something smaller. Leah would recast part of the bronze into a series of small plaques for the reclaimed sculptures. Each plaque would list the object's name, maker if known, and the year it became part of Cottonwood Crescent. No government designation, no official memorial, just residents choosing to remember their own things accurately. The remaining bronze would be returned to Leah's studio for future work. The board accepted. Cynthia did not. Her vote changed nothing. The bronze statue stayed for 30 days. Those became the funniest 30 days in Cottonwood Crescent history. Residents decorated it carefully without damaging the surface. During a heat wave, someone placed a giant sun hat on its head. When strong winds were forecast, Leah removed the hat and replaced it with a scarf engineered to avoid becoming airborne. Raymond received a new straw hat every week. Children named the giant figure Pointing Patty, although nobody named Patty lived in the neighborhood. Delivery drivers gave instructions such as, "Turn left at the enormous complaining woman." A plumber told me he had never located a house faster. Cynthia tried avoiding my street. That was difficult because the clubhouse sat in the direction of the statue's finger. Every time she walked to the office, the bronze figure appeared to announce her destination. Residents stopped asking where Cynthia was going. They simply followed the hand. The most satisfying moment happened during the final week. Cynthia returned home from grocery shopping and found a tour bus stopped near the entrance. It was not an official tour. The driver had taken a wrong turn while transporting retirees to an art market in Santa Fe. The passengers saw the statue. They demanded photographs. By the time Cynthia reached her driveway, 26 cheerful retirees were posing beneath the pointing arm. One woman asked Cynthia whether she was the artist. Another asked what crime the house had committed. Cynthia said the statue was being removed. The woman looked disappointed. Why? It has personality. Cynthia glanced toward my courtyard. Raymond stood beneath the bronze figure wearing a red hat. That, she said, is exactly the problem. The woman smiled. Then it is doing its job. Cynthia drove away without answering. During those 30 days, the board rewrote the decorative object rules. They removed the vague artistic merit committee, created clear size and safety standards, and allowed established pieces to remain unless they posed genuine hazards. Larger new features required drawings and structural review, but no single officer could decide whether an object possessed acceptable character. One rule addressed temporary accessories. Mrs. Delgado requested clarification on straw hats. The final wording allowed them. Cynthia remained president through the end of her term. She lost authority over landscape enforcement, which shifted to a 3-member committee that included Mrs. Delgado. This was not a resignation story or a sudden transformation. Cynthia continued attending meetings, correcting wording, and attempting to replace colorful proposals with beige alternatives. The difference was that everyone questioned her sooner. She could no longer turn preference into policy without resistance. When the 30th day arrived, Leah's crew returned with the crane. Residents gathered quietly as workers removed the giant clipboard, detached the pointing arm, lifted the torso, and lowered the bronze head onto a padded truck bed. Without the complete body, the face looked less authoritative and more surprised. Mrs. Delgado stood beside me. "Still a good planter." "You need to stop saying that near Leah." She wrote it down. The final section lifted away just before sunset. For the first time in a month, my house no longer sat beneath an accusing bronze finger. The courtyard felt wider, quieter, and slightly less supervised. Raymond remained. Leah placed him back beneath the desert willow on a new stone base. A small bronze plaque sat beside his chipped front hoof. It read, "Raymond, First Completed Sculpture by Leah Hollis. Narrative Activity. Ongoing." Cynthia stopped at the edge of the walkway. She read the plaque. Narrative activity is not a recognized classification. It is now. She looked at Raymond's eyebrows. They are still confrontational. He has been through a lot, Her eyes moved toward the empty spot where the giant statue had stood. "Where is the bronze going?" "Leah's studio." "All of it?" "Most." "What happened to the rest?" Mrs. Delgado answered. "Plaques?" Cynthia frowned. "For those objects?" "For people's objects." She looked across the neighborhood. The ceramic coyotes had returned to Juniper Lane. The carved owl sat beside the retired teacher's porch. The metal roadrunner stood near the entrance, welding marks fully visible. Color had returned 1 yard at a time. Cynthia's monument had disappeared. The personality she tried to remove had not. She looked toward Raymond again. "I still do not like him." "That is allowed." "I think he lowers the tone." "That is also allowed." She seemed surprised. "You are not going to argue?" "No." "Why?" "Because disagreement does not require removal." Cynthia studied me for a moment. Then she looked at the burro. "He does look unemployed." I smiled. Finally, an accurate review. She almost smiled back, but caught herself and walked toward the clubhouse. Raymond watched her leave beneath his straw hat. The neighborhood never forgot the bronze Karen. Photographs remained in garages, hallways, and community message threads. Someone made Christmas ornaments, shaped like the pointing hand. Leah eventually reused the bronze in a public sculpture featuring dozens of small hands holding different household objects. She called it What We Keep. Raymond stayed exactly where he belonged. He remained 28 inches tall, slightly chipped, overly expressive, and far more memorable than Cynthia's $186,000 legacy concept ever became. Children still stopped to see him, delivery drivers still used him as a landmark, and Mrs. Delgado continued changing his hats without permission. People say I replaced a small garden statue with a 14-foot bronze Karen. That is true, but the real revenge was not the height. It was forcing a woman who wanted every yard emptied of personality to stand beneath a giant version of herself, while the entire neighborhood reclaimed what she had hidden. Her monument disappeared because it represented only her, while Raymond remained because he represented a real relationship, an imperfect beginning, and a story nobody else had the right to simplify. That is the kind of judgment we celebrate at Sovereign Verdict, where the loudest authority does not always leave the longest legacy. Subscribe for more original HOA battles, ridiculous revenge, and homeowners who know that when someone removes a small piece of your story, sometimes the answer needs 14 feet of bronze.